Discord should know because I put it out there.
All right, welcome back. We're COMP253. That's Assets for Game Developers. In the fall 2018 semester at Centennial, we are lesson 2, part 2 of our broadcasts, Intro to UI and UX Continued. Again, we're doing everything with Unity just as a demonstration. Where we left off in the video, we clicked the button. Very, very simple button here. And when I click the button, I can see that I get a clicked. All right. And sometimes what I want to do is transition from one scene to the other, right? So we can do a lot of different things with buttons, right? But for now, what I want to do is before we transition, I want to change my hello label. This is my hello label. I want to change what it says. Right now it says nothing. I want to change something that says hello, like hello world, okay? And then we'll mess around with this stuff. All right, so how do we do that? So we have our hello label, right? Hello label is a game object. It's inside the scene, right? And I need to get a reference. And what I mean is there's no connection between our hello label right now and our script whatsoever. So if I go to my UI script, if I double click onto it and I bring this up, I need some way of connecting my hello label. And the easiest way is to create a public property in my script. So in my script, I'll make a public property, right? And I'm going to call this, first of all, one more thing to do. Let me undo that for a second. In order for me to connect with user interface elements in my script, I need to actually add that capability in. And the way to do that is I'm going to add a new using statement. So I'm going to say using Unity Engine .ui. Okay, I need that statement. So using Unity Engine .ui. That's in line 4 of my script. Once I have that, I can go to public. I can make it a public object, right? Remember, when I add stuff, I'm going to add an element, right? And normally I identify the type first. So my type is going to be text. First, that's a text type. And then the name of the object is my hello label. Okay, that's my name of the object, right? I can call this thing whatever I want. I made it capital H and capital L. By convention, usually you put a lowercase h like this, and this is called camel case. All right, for people who don't remember or who don't know, who didn't do object-oriented programming, whatever.
Was the same with your method down there?
Yes, you could also put. Although I like to put
making my OCD go crazy.
Yeah, I know. So that's the hello label, if you notice, right? And my hello label, right, is of type text. Okay, but is my hello label instantiated with anything? And the answer is right now no. But however, when you do this in the script, if I save my script and I go back to Unity, let's go back to Unity for a second. If I go back to Unity. And if I look at my game controller, here's my game controller. Take a look at this. In my script now, this is what you should see. You should see a little space here in my script. And it says hello label. The hello label is actually exposed in my editor. Does everyone see this? So now my hello label is exposed in my editor, and I have a little space that says none. None means there's no reference right now to a text object. I can make a reference, and the easiest way to do that in Unity is drag and drop. So I can take my hello label and drag and drop it into this little reference area like this. So I took this hello label and dragged it in there. Now I have a reference to this object, and it's connected to my script. That's how it works. By the way, there's other ways to do this. This is not the only way. You can do it fully programmatically without any dragging and dropping. Okay? But for now, let's use the easy way. I'm going to save my scene. I'm going to go back to my script. Okay, so now that I know that there's an object connected to this hello label, I can do something with it. Inside of my click me button script, we'll leave the debug.log for now. I can go down in here and I can say something like this. I can say, well, hey, hello label. I want to say that I want to change the text value of my hello label, right? I want to make that equal to hello world. Okay, that's pretty simple. A hello label will say hello world. And if I go back out here, so this is what I did here. I saved my script, right? And if I go back out to Unity, and if I press play, and if I've done everything correctly, when I click my click me button, then you'll see my hello world come up over here. Do you guys see that? My hello world came up when I click my click me button. Now, the way I did this is I have a hello label that's inside my scene here, and I have my button and I put my script in place. Okay, so if you don't see hello world come up, that means you'd missed something, or you don't have your hello label in scene somewhere. Right, so my hello label is actually physically in my scene, in my my canvas, and all I've done here is I've added a hello label.text. Text is the property of any text object. The text property is what it really means is inside of the hello label or the text object in your hierarchy, there is a text component, right? That's what it is. And the text component has a text property, which is right here. And that's what I'm modifying. I'm modifying this property. Notice it's empty right now. And to show you this, if I put something else, some other text, right? Here's some other text. And if I change it, so if I run this thing, you'll see it starts off as some other text, just to show you. Some other text is hanging out there, right? And when I click me, it actually changes some other text to hello world, right? So it shows you that it changes. Are you with me? All right, so that's the first interactive script we've written. So we've enabled our user interface. Remember, this course is all around user interfaces and elements to make the thing look good. I'm not talking about gameplay in this course. We're not doing the gameplay. That's not part of my thing. We might do some games, but only demonstrate user interface elements or stuff we bring in from Blender or from someplace else, okay? But not for making games. We don't make games necessarily in this course. We're just making user interface elements.
There we go. No, why wasn't it?
Is it working now?
I didn't change anything, but it must come up.
Unity sometimes is wonky. Okay, cool. Couple things. This text is really ugly. It also has a type of Arial, and it's only 14 points. I want to make this really large, my text object for hello label. What if I made this text like something like 50? Oh man, now it disappears. The reason why it disappears is if you notice up on the top here of the text object, it has a height. If I make the text height or my font height 50 and it only has a height of 30, you won't be able to see it. You have to make it actually something like 60. And now you can see it. But now it's too wide. And what I can do is I can increase the width by physically typing something in here, a value. Or if I hover over the width label in my component, I can actually scroll to the right and increase the width until I see the value, some other text. Okay? So that's one thing. That's one way to do it. You can also just physically change this by actually typing in a value, 360. Okay? This text is in an arbitrary random value, random location, and so is this click me button. If I wanted to put it in a specific location on the screen, I could do that. So let's click on the click me button first. And notice this little rect transform. Even though it's a game object, we know in Unity that a user interface object is a slightly different type of game object. It's not a game object that you play or move around the screen. It's actually for display UI components. And you have this little target that looks like this, right? If I click on the target, it actually allows you to change the anchor for this text, right? But what I really want to do is I want to press the Alt key. If I press the Alt key, you can see that I have some other things I can do. If I want to move this text immediately to the top left corner of my screen, I can do so by clicking this little button. Boop, and it appears there, right? This game object, right? Same thing if I want to the bottom or the right or the left or the middle. So this is the exact middle of my screen, right? And I'm doing that by pressing the Alt button. Notice when I press the Alt button, my rect transform changes. Look, it changes like this when I press the Alt button, right?
When I press what looks like it's supposed to be the top left, it should go to the bottom left.
Okay, could be where your anchor is.
That's
So that's the other part. So the other thing is, if I click on here, I can also anchor this. Right now, it's anchored in the middle, and this it determines the values. My 000 point is right here in the middle. That's what it does. However, I could anchor this thing to the top left corner, right? So I could say that my anchor for this button is the top left corner, which changes these values, these X and Y positions. That means that the anchor, notice this little hash mark right here. It looks like this little target. That's the anchor of my button now on the top left corner because I clicked top left corner. If I want to make it the top right corner, I can just click that. And now the anchor moves to the top right. Anchor means where the button rotates from, the center of the button, right? The center of the screen in relation to the button. Okay. Sometimes we want to anchor it to the top left or top right, especially we want to make this compatible with multiple devices. For example, I want an offset for my button, which is 200 points from the top left of my screen and down to the middle. So it responds always on every screen 200 and something else, right? You can do that relative to your screen size. So if I make it to the top left, and then my button has 328 pixels to the right, and which is interesting, the X position, 328 pixels, or 328, sorry, points. Let's not say pixels, right? Because this is not pixel perfect. It's not pixel perfect. It's 328 units, okay? And we think about this, what this really is, because we've expanded the canvas really, really large, it's actually 328 meters. 328 meters to the right, and negative 274 meters down from the top left corner, right? That's what this is. All right, because I've centered it on the left, top left corner. Now, if I did this, and I went back to here, and I press Alt, right? And then I press this, it's going to go to the top, to the right, bottom. I can make the button appear anywhere I want automatically, or right back to the middle. Okay, so there's the middle position. If I did this, though, notice that my anchor again, if I go back to my anchor, is in the middle. My anchor appears in the middle. I've actually modified my anchor again back to the middle. Right, just FYI. Same thing with this thing. If I want this label, so here's my label, hello label. I want this label to be somewhere else. Like right now, the position is 0 and 79. I press Alt, so Alt. And if I want it exactly in the middle, it's going to be in the middle. If I want it to the top, I can look to the top. And if I want to make it something like manually, like again, I can scroll out. Right? So let's scroll down. I can scroll down and I can put it, it's still in the middle, centered in the middle, right? It's still centered in the middle. But if you notice, right, what I have here is it's not as wide as my screen. And sometimes what I want to do with labels is if I want to make them exactly, the text inside the label completely centered, I want to make the label as wide as my screen. And I can do that by just clicking these little control points. So I'm going to make this control point as wide, and I want to make this control point this wide. Notice that my label text is kind of to the left, because by default, my text is left aligned and to the top of my text object. So if notice I can make my text as big as I want, and this is my text object, and it's to the top left corner, okay? Because that's what this is showing me. This is the controls for alignment. If I want to make it centered, I can click center. And if I want to make it middle, I can go middle, which is the middle align. So now when I move these controls, my text will recenter along middle and center. And I want to make this kind of snap to the scene. So now it's always going to be the exact center. Whatever text I put in there is going to recenter itself, especially things like hello world. Hello world is a different size than some other text, right? Any text I put in there, though, will try and center itself in the middle of my screen now. Okay, so if I press play, and then if I press click me, you can see that hello world is perfectly centered in the screen, right? It's not centered this way, vertically, but horizontally, it's exactly in the middle of my screen. Okay? So that's how you do it from a centering perspective. Cool. All right, so this is my scene 1. And notice my scene 1 is right here. Here's my scene 1. What I want to do is I want to make another scene called the menu scene. And my menu scene is going to get me to scene 1 somehow. Okay, so we're going to make a new scene, but all it's going to have inside of it is a menu. Okay, let's do that. So I'm going to go to a new scene, create new scene, create. And by the way, later on, I'm going to put this whole project up on GitHub for you guys. So you can download my project and see what I've done and compare my project with your project. Okay, so I'm going to go to create new scene. I'm going to call this new scene menu. And I'm going to double click on the menu to enable that scene. I'm going to save the scene. Here it is. My new scene has nothing inside of it. And I want to go to the asset store for a second. Okay. Actually, if you look at assets, and we're going to make these assets later on. But for now, I want to go to import package. And here's something I wanted to point out here, right? if you downloaded and installed Unity, right? I downloaded and installed Unity with everything. I downloaded it with all the standard assets. I downloaded it and installed support for iOS and Android and WebGL and a bunch of other stuff. If you didn't, sometimes you'll have nothing in here, right? The package in here will be completely blank, right? If I click on 2D, right, this gives me 2D elements. And I don't have to include these, but you can notice I get some animation and some platforms and blah, blah, blah. We're going to get to this later. For now, this is not what I want. I want to actually include in the asset store, right? If I type in, I'm going to go to the asset store. And the way I got the asset stores tab is I go to Window, I can go to General, and I go to Asset Store. Or you can also, type Control and 9, the Control key, and hit 9, and it'll open up the Asset Store tab, and you can dock it on the top by dragging and dropping. So what I mean by that is, if you don't have the Asset Store tab, I can get rid of it. And if I want to get it back, I can hit Control 9, and it goes back, right? And if it's hanging out, if it gives you a tab that looks like this, so kind of a floating tab around somewhere else like this, right? Here's my floating asset store tab. And I wanted to dock it, I can just drag it right to the top, okay? Now in here, what I want to do is I want to look at Unity Technologies. I can actually spell properly. Unity Technologies. The Unity Technologies gives you all the stuff that Unity Technologies has built, right? So ARKit plugin, they've got a bunch of other stuff here, right? But I can also search for something like user interface. If I go UI, right? If I type in UI, or if I want to type in standard assets, I'm going to try and find something that's someone else made. Standard assets. If I press enter, standard assets will give you a bunch of standard assets here. Some of them have been created for us as well. Like there's assets for Unity 4 and blah, blah. There's also this asset right here. This is the standard asset. So if you don't have standard assets, you can go here. And what it'll show you in here is a bunch of standard assets that you can download. So if you don't have the standard assets, you can always download this thing, right? You can see that on the bottom, there'll be a download section. I've already downloaded it, so I don't have to do that. But you'll have a download like this for free. So if you don't have Unity assets, you can download them. But if I want some kind of different user interface, as an example, in my assets, I can put import a package. And there's characters, cross-platform input, effects, environment, particle systems, prototyping, utility, and vehicles. These are all the standard things you get, right? But if I download the standard assets package, standard assets, going back to that, and I click on this one, and I click download, just in case you don't have it. What it does is it downloads the package. It's free. You have to have a Unity account for this, and you have to have a Unity account anyway right now because you downloaded Unity, right? So you have this. If I click import, what it's going to do is going to pick up all the standard assets that I want in here. Going to show up a big list of standard assets. And I want to show you these assets just in case you don't have them. You don't have to include all of them. This standard asset package is massive. It gives you characters, prototyping, special effects, a bunch of stuff, right? And if you look here, if I scroll down, right, it even has things like a menu with an event system and a menu loader and all this other stuff, okay? So a bunch of stuff, nav meshes and different prefabs. We'll talk about prefabs later on, and a bunch of different things. And, you know, a lot of stuff here that it comes with. Let's just do it and click import. I want to import everything. Okay. It's going to take some time to import all the packages. By the way, a lot of times it's built in, but your system may not include it. That's why I'm making you do it. Okay. For example, maybe you didn't click on standard assets for something, or maybe the system in front of you, if you're using the computers, the school system didn't include it somehow. If not, what this is going to do is import scripts. And one thing that Unity does is it's going to create another folder here called standard assets. Okay. I don't like it, but you know, I don't like it for a couple reasons. it really clutters my scene. It clutters my assets, right? For me to include all this stuff inside of a standard assets folder. So sometimes what I like to do is I want to call it like imported assets or something like that. It's not my own, someone else's. These are someone else's assets. These are coming with Unity. But they're a great way of testing stuff out and prototyping. That's what the standard assets are for, right? In a real game environment, you would override these assets and make your own, which we're going to do throughout the semester, right? But I want to include some examples of stuff that this comes with so that we can use them and we can program some of this stuff out so you see how it works. Some things that have already been made for us. And then we'll talk about how it was made, right? Which is the next part. One day when this whole thing loads, all of these crazy number of assets, like this is probably a gigabyte of data that I'm downloading.
It's only about 180 megabytes.
Are you sure?
Yep, because I just looked at it.
Yay! I hope you're right. If it's only 180 megabytes, it should be in right now. But it's not. And my system is pretty fast. I got an SSD and I got 16 gigs RAM.
Yeah, but it's
and
also limited by the fact that each file probably is small, right?
Let's see.
So that's why like uploading and downloading a bunch of small files takes longer than
It does take longer, that's for sure. It does take a whole lot of time, right?
I actually noticed that on Steam.
A lot longer.
Because I have gigabit, but certain games would go slower because they had a lot of small files. I actually looked up online and found that out. Okay.
The other thing is it comes with a bunch of models we can always import into Blender later to take a look at, right? Because there's a lot of FBX files that the standard assets comes with. One advantage of downloading the standard assets is that I don't have to go individually and go asset, import asset, asset, import asset, asset, import asset. I don't have to do that. It is included. Okay, I'm just going to close off this. I'm going to go to my scene now. It's imported. But take a look here. I got a sample scene. Here's my sample scenes. And I got something called standard assets. Okay, standard assets. So in my standard assets, it comes with a bunch of stuff. It comes with some cameras and some prefabs for cameras, a free look camera rig, a handheld camera, a multi-purpose camera. I'm just going to go over some of the assets. In 2D, it comes with some animations and animators, some materials, prefabs, and scripts. In my characters, it comes with a first-person controller, a third-person controller, and a rollerball. In my cross-platform, it actually adds some cross-platform support for key presses or, screen presses and so on. They also have some water effects, glass refraction, some post-processing and environment, speed tree for the actual stuff, water basic, different kinds of fonts, a bunch of particle systems and prefabs, some physics material for ice and so on, prototyping in terms of models and shaders. Here's some models for prototyping, different models. I also have some utility stuff that it comes with in terms of some functions, some scripts and prefabs. Here's some a frame rate counter as an example. And it also comes with some aircraft and cars. So a bunch of stuff it comes with, and it's all free to download. It also shows us some simple scenes, and one of the simple scenes it comes up with is menu, this menu scene. And in the menu scene, there's some prefabs. There's an event system and a menu loader and a main menu UI, right? Let's look, before we make our own menu scene, let's look at the menu scene that it comes with. So I'm going to go into sample scenes menu, and then under sample scenes, you should have some scene file. Let's see if there's a scene file. Maybe not. Usually it does have a scene file, like examples, right? But one thing it does have is this prefab. And it has a prefab for an event system. It has prefabs are, I want you to think about prefabs as someone else's or your own prefabricated instances of objects. That's what they are. Once I make a prefab, I can always drag and drop a prefab that I've already created back into the scene, and all the things I saved about it are restored. For example, I had a ground and I had a sphere. If I made those two into prefabs, I can use that ground and sphere with all the same materials that I chose in every scene that I want, as opposed to making a new plane, making a new sphere, attaching my materials. That's all extra steps I don't have to do if I make a prefab. Okay, so these prefabs here right, I have something called a menu UI. If I pull it into my scene, you can see that I have a little menu. And I also have a network game menu and a network score bar. And I also have a menu loader. Here's my menu loader and an event system. In the game, it doesn't look like anything except for this little thing right here. And if I press play on this thing right now, you can see that when I run it, I have this little menu. Take a look. And if I click onto this, it actually allows me to load any of my sample assets, like 2D assets and characters and vehicles and whatever. I can do that in here. That's what this little menu thing does. So I can go to 2D, and I can go back. I can go to my 2D platformer, my character, right? And it allows me to do different things. This is this little menu that I can add in. Here's my particles, particle sandbox, and my vehicles, and so on. So that's what this little event system, that's what this main menu UI does. It's this thing here. It's on the top right corner of my screen. And if you look at my scene, it actually adds it on to this part of my scene. So that's something we can use with standard assets, where it gives you some samples, okay, for models and some stuff. There's a bunch of models here. Under models, we have bricks and cubes and goalposts and a bunch of other stuff that it gives you. Some, you know, a pickup, a pillar, you know, a platform, you know, different kinds of platforms you can play with, right? A ring, a loop, you know, a bunch of stuff that you can play, and you can form out your scene with some of these prefabs, all right? And there's a bunch of other ones that it gives you: a ground arena, a house, you know, a loop, like I said before, some kind of the sea, smash boxes. There's some smash boxes. It gives you a bunch of stuff, a wall, right? And these are all things that you can download and install. Let's just get rid of the menu items for now. So I just wanted to show you what prefabs are all about. And we're going to make our own prefabs in a second. So in the menu, I want to have some basic menu items. I want to have a thing that says start, my start scene, right? Let's do that. So let's make a new button. All right, so I'm going to make a new UI, button. There it is. Here's my button. Just like before, I want to press Alt for the button and make it so it's centered in the screen. And I want to make this button called the Start button. Start button. And it's going to say Start. So I'm going to, in my text of the button, I'm going to call this button Start. Let's hide away all these sample scenes and standard assets. Those are just things I wanted to add in to show you that. Here's my Start button. And the Start text. And if I want to make my button bigger, right now my button by default, right? If you look at my button itself, it has a standard state, and the color of my button right now for my image is white. Let's make my image a different color. So we'll make the image blue. My button is going to be blue. Maybe another color other than this blue, which I don't like. Maybe a lighter blue. There we go. Kind of a lighter blue color. And you know what? My text, here's, from a user experience perspective, is it good to have black text on a blue button? Can I see the text very well? The answer is no, right? You always give contrast to text. So one of the things you want to try and do is in your text object of the button, change the colors from black, the color text from black to white. And let's also do a couple of other things, right? In the character font, right now it's Arial. Let's change the font style to bold. So we'll bold the button, so it's a start. And we'll change the font size to like 20. All right, so it's a much bigger button. There it is. By the way, this is a standard button. We're gonna learn to make other kinds of buttons that are non-standard, probably next week, where I do some pixel art and some other art by hand, right? Start is the button. Okay, and I want to label, right? And another thing you can add into the canvas element itself is something called a panel. Let's add a panel. So on the canvas, I want to right click and I want to add, under UI, I want to add a panel. Here's the panel. By the way, notice the panel looks like it's occluding the button. And if I were going to go out to UI for a second into 3D mode, right? And if I was to look at the panel from the side, it looks like this. The panel and the button are on the same plane, just letting you know, right? And it doesn't matter whether I put the button below it like this, right? Or the panel above, typically. But when I look at 2D, you can see that when I did that, the button now appears to be inside or in front of the panel. And it's interesting the way Canvas works. Canvas works that whatever you list inside the canvas, it kind of shows in order that you've listed it. So the panel goes first, then the start button. The panel's behind, the start button's in front. If you want to be more explicit, what you can also do inside the canvas is you can specify layers, but we're not going to do that right now. Okay, so here's my start button. My canvas is massive. Let's make this panel smaller. So we're going to take the panel, and what we can do with the panel is we can make it so that it is looking like it's half the size. Kind of like this, like a start button, start panel, like this. And if you look at the game, it looks kind of like this. But it's not centered, and you can do the same thing we did with the button, where I take the Alt key, press this, press the Alt key, and press the exact center. So now it's completely centered in the screen, right? And if you want the panel itself, you can make it smaller. So you don't have to make it the whole size of the screen. You can make it so it's like, it kind of outlines the button, something like that. And then if you really wanted to make it exact, you can go like Alt and then center. So you can center the panel inside there. And if I go back to the game, you can see that it says start, right? The panel adds a transparency. You can make the panel any color you want. So again, if I go panel, and if you notice the color of the panel is right here, I can change this color by moving this object like normal. So I can make the color a pinky color or maybe a grayish color. So the panel can be grayish. And it has some kind of transparency attached to the panel, all right? That's by default. So I'm going to kind of click onto that. Notice that the alpha transparency right now is 100, and I can even make it less transparent. Okay, so this is the panel. If I want to make the panel a little bit taller, like higher up, I can do that. So what I can do is, well, let me undo that. First, I can center the panel. So I can go back to the panel, and I can press Alt and center, so that's centered. And now that I know it's centered, what I can do is I can increase the height of the panel like this, because I'm going to put a little message in here. And the message is going to be below the panel, right? So I can kind of put it, I can put it inside the panel as well. If I click on the panel itself and right, and if I go click UI, and if I put text, that text will appear to be inside the panel object itself, right? So it can be, it'll be centered, or the panel itself will be the parent of the UI object. I want to make the UI object the size of my panel, like before, okay? And I want to make it so that's the whole top of the panel is the UI object, like this big. And what I want to do here is I want to change the text of the UI object, the label, the text object. I want to change the text color to white. Again, you can make it any color you want, but white seems to stand out for me. As well as something big like 40 pixels or 40, 40, like this. And let's just change the text to welcome. We'll say something like welcome, right? And if I want to center it, I can click center and middle, which centers my text inside the panel. And if I look and see what that looks like, it looks like this. Welcome, right? Start. It's pretty simple, right? Right now, there's no animation or anything like that. My button doesn't change when I move or anything. I can do all those changes later on, right? For now, all we care about is there's a welcome and a start. Now, here's something that we want to do in our menu. We don't care for the color of the background. So I can go to the main camera like we talked about before and turn this skybox to solid color. Make sure that it's black, like we talked about. And now when you look at the panel, it looks like this. Welcome, right? And start. All right, so kind of a little simple menu that we've kind of created. We're going to make it nicer. Won't be this week. Next week, we're going to actually use images and animations, right? All right, so if you look at this, the welcome screen, and I want to click on the start button, and I want to make it go from this menu, this scene, to the next scene. The scene that we had, number 1. Remember the 1 scene? In order for us to do that, there's a couple things we need to do. First, to prep, all right? First, I want to go to File. I want to go to Build Settings. And notice in the Build Settings, we have this scene called Main, Scenes Main. I want to add the open scene, right? I want to delete this one. So get rid of Scenes Main. And what you can do is there's 2 ways. One, I can add in the open scenes by clicking Add Open Scenes. So it's a Scenes menu now. Scenes menu. The other way to do it is, if you don't have anything in here, again, I get this by going File, Build Settings. That's how I got it. Okay, File, Build Settings. The other way to do this is to actually go into the Scenes folder on the right and drag and drop into this area here. So I'm going to drag the menu scene first, and then the 1 scene, like this. So there's 2 scenes, menu and 1, and I dragged and dropped it in here. By the way, the order that you list the scenes is the order that Unity will start the program. So if I list 1 as first, that's the first thing I'm going to see, the first scene that's going to load. Otherwise, menu is going to load first, which is what I want. Okay? Cool. I'm not going to build anything. I'm just going to close this off. But this is the first thing I need to do. Okay? Next, I need to wire up my button. Remember, just like we did last time? We're going to make a new game controller. So in my scene, I'm going to make a new empty object. I'm going to call this thing game controller. And I'm going to tag it as a game controller too. We don't need it right now, but I will do it. And what I want to do is I want to go to scripts, and I have this UI script, okay? But I want to make another one, okay? I want to make a new script, create new C# script, and I'm going to call this the menu script. By the way, you just call it menu if you want, but I'm going to call it menu script so I know it's the script. And later I can search for scripts. If I go to my game controller, I want to drag and drop this time the menu script to my game controller like this. All right, so now it's attached. My menu script is attached to my game controller. All right. I'm going to double click my menu script. And I want to program it just like I did the last one. So this is good practice. So again, just like before, what I want to do here is I want to make a new function. And this time we'll name it properly. Okay, so the function should be called something like public. First of all, it has to be public and void, right? And the function should be something like on start button click, you know, something like this. We'll call it on lowercase o, on start button click. Okay, and on start button click is, I can put some comments in here by using 2 forward slashes like normal in C#, right? I can say that the start button event handler. That's what this thing is, right? And what I want to do is when I click the start button, I want it to take me to the next scene. That's what I want it to do, okay? So in order for me to do that, I have to enable scene management in my script. And I kind of did that. I showed you that last week. And the way to do that is you have to go to using, another using statement, using Unity Engine dot scene management, or actually it's called scene management by itself, I think now. Scene manager.
Unity Engine dot.
Yeah, I tried that. Oh, I love when this happens. Scene management.
Yeah.
That right? Ah, like that. Unity Engine dot scene management. This happens sometimes. You know, with the stuff, sometimes you have to close this down, and then I go back to menu script and double click.
Hasn't happened on my Mac yet.
That's good.
Have you sent your Mac out to get fixed yet?
It's out. It's out to get fixed. Okay, go. Hold on a second. There we go. Yeah, so this is okay. And sometimes what happens is you'll get some weird stuff where Unity Engine doesn't give me any kind of, I'm not getting any support right now. It's okay. It just Sometimes it happens with Visual Studio, with Visual Studio Code, with Mono Develop. Happens with all of them, all right? So if you get this problem, don't worry about it. One thing to note is down here, what I want to do is I want to use the scene manager. So I want to say scene manager, right? And I'm not going to need any code hinting right now. I want to get load scene, I believe is what it is. Scene manager.load scene, am I right?
Yeah.
And then you want to load scene, the name of the scene. The reason why we brought the scenes into the builder, right? Into build settings is because it will never recognize the name of the scene unless that scene is listed inside the build settings, okay? I called my scene 1 with a capital 1. Make sure that yours is named properly. So mine is going to be called 1, scene 1. And so what it's going to do is when I click my button, it's going to load up the scene that's called 1. That's what this thing says. And if I ran it properly, if this is right, and if I go back to here and press play, if I did everything correctly, shouldn't give me an extra. So it says null reference error, object reference not set to an instance of an object. And if I click onto this, I see that my 2D character couldn't load because it has not been able to build settings. And remember, I had this other stuff. Particles couldn't be loaded because it hasn't been added to the scene, and a bunch of us. The reason why I'm getting all this stuff is because my standard assets, this is my standard assets, included a bunch of stuff. Remember I told you? And I wanted to show you what prefabs look like. That's why I did that. And also get some other stuff. But if this causes you a problem, and sometimes it does like this, and that's why I'm getting some really weird stuff happening, is I can delete them. I can delete all this stuff. I can just right click here and I can just click on delete. And what this does, it'll actually remove all my standard assets that I got in my scene from the scene. And if I press play now, it shouldn't cause me an issue anymore.
So I have that working where it goes to the next scene, but I had to move the start button away from the panel because
You have to put the panel underneath.
I thought I did.
So what did I miss? I forgot to wire up my button. So if I got to go to my main menu, here's my canvas, here's my start button. On my start button, underneath the script, my button script, there is this on click. I got to click the plus button here. And then I got to take the game controller and drag and drop it. And from here, I got to choose the function like I did last time where it says menu script. And then I want to choose the on start button click script. There it is. And then if I press play, you'll see that that now will, when I click the start button, it'll move me to my next scene. Okay? So let me do that again. So you should see this. You see a little menu that looks like this. And if I click my start button, right, it takes me to my new scene. Okay? And if I click my click me button, it says hello world. Right? So one scene loads, and then it takes me by using my scene manager to the next scene. That's what it does. Okay? Guys and girl, these are the basic interactions you need. Basic interactions in order for you to make the game go. Right? That's why I showed you this stuff. Okay? One more thing is when you die, right? So sometimes you're going to die. As an example, your player dies, and you want to go to a game over scene. You can still use scene manager.load scene, and then you might have a game over screen that pops up that will load. And the game over scene will have two buttons, maybe a reset button, a restart button, or a play again, or go back to main menu, right? Depending on what it is. And that menu, little menu that comes up, or little couple buttons that float around, or whatever, those buttons are still going to have this invoke the scene manager in order for you to take you back and forth. Okay, so very, very simple. One more thing to note is right now, when we go into my scene, if I hover over my button, and if I click on my button, notice that, and we're going to go over this again another day, but if my button itself has the transition, when I want to transition from one state of the button to another state, it has something called color tint. Okay? So this is the default behavior built into Unity. And Unity always recommends change this. Okay? Because this default behavior is somewhat basic. So, when you hover over your button, you get a different tint on your screen. Okay? And you can change the tint color. And notice that it's also using a target graphic called start button, which is this. That's the target graphic. And notice it's 32 by 32. It's actually quite interesting what this thing is, this start button color graphic, okay? It's actually built into Unity, this start button graphic. And what it does is it's a 32 by 32 pixel icon. That's what it really is, with rounded corners, right? And what it's going to do is it's going to take this little button here, right? And it's going to, when I want to make this button larger, it's going to stretch this button without changing the border of the top or the bottom, right? We can make our own, and we're going to do that next week. When we start covering pixel art, we can make our button very stylized, like a retro-looking button. We're going to create that button on our own, okay? But I want you to understand where it's getting its stuff. So again, from the beginning, we have color tint and a target graphic, which is the default graphic. And then we have different states. These are different states. Here's one color, normal color. Here's highlighted color. Highlighted color is when we're hovering over it, right? Then there's the press color. When I press down on the button, there's a certain color, right? And it kind of tints the color, the button, with that. You can change the tint values, of course, to whatever you want. So for example, if I want my highlighted color for my button, instead of it being white, to be more reddish, right, as an example, just to make it more extreme. And if I play this thing, you can see that as I hover over, the button now becomes red. It not only tints, but it tints the whole button to red. Okay? Change the whole button. If I click over there, I can also change these values, these alpha values. So if I only wanted to kind of tint the value to make it more reddish, I can change my opacity level of my button to something like 100, which is slightly, it's not exactly 100%. It's like 40% opaque. So if I go back, and if I press plus or play, and if I hover over, you'll see more of a purplish button now, right? Or a brownish button. There we go. Okay. So that's what this highlighted color does. Let's make it back to red. I want to make it fully opaque. So make it a red button. How about when I press the button? That's the press state. Disabled color. So disabled button is if I want to disable this button. So the button itself, I put this, make this disabled. This is enabled. This is disabled. You can see that it gives it a color, right? It actually shows it. But I can actually enable or disable it, the button itself. So the button has different states. And I think there's an enabled or disabled state that I can enact.
That's kind of like when something's grayed out, right?
Here, interactable. See how this is interactable? Interactable makes it disabled. So if I press play, you can see now that I can't interact with the button at all, right? I can't do anything with it. Okay, so that's non-interactable. I can also have a color multiplier, so I can multiply my color. When you multiply color, it actually darkens stuff. We'll talk about that next week. We can also change fade duration, how long it takes for it to fade. So I can increase this number to like 0.5 seconds. That's in seconds. So if I press play, and if I go to hover over, you can see it takes a lot longer for it to fade in and out. So it's not, it doesn't happen automatically. It kind of has a different effect for the button. Okay. Cool. Navigation we'll cover later on, but that allows us to do to change the way the buttons interact with each other. If there's more than one button, we can change it so that it goes horizontal or vertical. So when I click on the tab key, or if I want to go to the next interactive element, it'll go to whatever element is the next in line. Right now, we want to keep it automatic. So that's the default behavior of Unity, color tint. But we can also choose other options. For example, Sprite Swap. Sprite Swap actually changes the sprite of the button. So Sprite Swap means I have, instead of having only one image, I can have several different images, one for each state, which we're going to explore next week. All right. And the last one is custom animation. All right, custom animation. So if I go here and if I press play, and if I don't do anything here with normal and highlighted and pressed and disabled, right, these animation states, and I can also auto-generate the animation. What it does is it generates a bunch of animation frames, for me to do certain things. So again, if I was to press play, and if I left it like this, one thing now is there's no interaction, there's no transition, because I haven't enabled any of these animations. And we'll kind of talk about animations next week. If I click auto-generate animation, it's going to actually generate files for me. I don't want that. So there's a bunch of different options, or none. None means I don't want any transition. There's no hover effects or nothing like that. And there might be a reason for that. But for now, let's just leave it as color tint. So this is the default behavior. So now the default behavior looks like this. Like I said, I kind of go over, and I hover over, and it turns to red, and it goes away in 0.5 seconds. I can make it faster or slower, right? The really cool thing about animation, which we'll learn next week, is I can modify the size of the button. So I hover over it, and I can increase the size. I can also make it shiver and shake. I can add particle effects to the button. I can do all kinds of stuff to make this UI way friendlier, way nicer looking than this simple, ugly panel with a button. This is really ugly, but it's the first step for you guys to do. Okay, so here's your exercise, and I'm going to put the lab up at the end of the class, right? But here's your exercise. So let's just get out of this. First of all, I'm going to save my files, save scene. I'm also going to save my project. So here's my project, so you can have it. I'm going to close off my project like I did last week. And I know I have all of my projects under Unity projects, okay? So what I want to do is I want to kick off a command line, just like I did last time, because I want to save this up on GitHub, right? I want to CD to my desktop. And I want to CD to Unity projects, right? And if I do a directory listing of Unity projects, I have these ones right now. One of them is called COMP253 F2018 Lesson 2. I want to go there. So comp. Okay, I want to clear the screen. And when I do a directory, this is my actual Unity project. This is what it looks like on the structure, the folder structure, right? In order for me to start off GitHub, like we talked about last time, I need 3 commands: git init, clear, git add dot. I don't have to clear, but I'm showing you how much you have to do. And the last one is, when it's done, this is a lot of, so it's adding all my assets this way, all the assets that I have. The last one is git commit -m, and then initial commit. Those are the 3 commands I want to start for my Git repository. So here's the thing: I have to close down Unity for me to do this, because Unity has a lot of meta tags and meta files open, right? When it's open, you cannot use version control on the command line like this when Unity is open. You'll miss stuff. It won't work properly, right? Okay, I'm going to clear the screen. And if I look at it, if I go git status, right, you can see that I have on branch master. If I get git log, I can see that I have 1 commit. And a commit, just to refresh your memories from last week, is just a snapshot of the current state of your files, right? So again, and we'll talk more about GitHub later on. By the way, you'll be learning GitHub and COMP253, I believe, because that's what Wallace is teaching you guys.
Teach us, but
He did or didn't?
he didn't do it for us, but
He did it for you guys? Yeah, you should learn it. I don't. That's why I'm not.
Mostly just time.
I don't want to repeat myself or repeat his good work.
That we were,
the other thing is, I'm also going to go to GitHub, and I'm going to go to Centennial College. Remember that I'm saving all my stuff that we do together up on GitHub. And if you get to that by github.com/Centennial College, I put that on the Slack link, right? A Slack list, right? So this is the last one we did. We do one? I think I did. Anyways, let's make a new one. I'm going to make a new repository. So go down to, where the heck is my new repositories? Is it because I'm zoomed out? Probably because I'm zoomed out. Oh, I'm maybe zoomed in. Let me see. Yep. So I have this little plus button, or I can do this little new link. Let's click the new link. And when I do new, when GitHub responds, I can make a new repository called COMP253. And then it's F2018, and then lesson 2. And what this thing will do is it will initialize my Git repository. Think about a GitHub Git repository online as an empty container where I'm going to send my files. That's what it's going to be like, okay? And I want to take the last 2 lines of code here, these 2 lines. I want to copy them. I'm going to go back to my command line here, and I'm going to right-click here and press enter. And what this is going to do is, if your GitHub is set up properly, it's going to push everything else up to GitHub. So for this project, if you want to get the stuff that I did and compare my stuff with your stuff, please look on GitHub. Everything will be there now. You can download the project and fool around with it and break it and do whatever you want, okay? And if I refresh, you can also look at my scripts. They're very simple. So if you actually look at my scripts, so if I go to assets, and if I go to scripts, there's a few scripts that we made, a couple of them. One is this menu script, and the other one is a UI script. The menu script actually has this start button event handler, and this is what I did with the scene manager.load scene. Okay, so very simple. So that's GitHub. So my requirements for the lab are going to be like this. I want you to use some form of sketching. You can use a freehand sketch if you want to, or whatever, but the requirement's going to be like this. Sketch out an idea for a 2D platformer game. It has to have non-diegetic elements, some kind of score, some kind of life level. I want you to show where an example platform will be, where the player is gonna start, right? Maybe potential hazards like an enemy. Draw it all out, sketch it all out. I want one page, one level of what it's going to look like. Everything should be labeled. Okay, how can you do this? You can use an online tool if you want to called Mockups. I think it's a pretty cool tool. It's free to use, free to try. Sorry. And what you can do is you can, if I click try it now for free, what it'll allow you to do is do a couple things. It'll allow me to physically draw on the screen by myself. It'll actually also allow me to set up my rectangle if you want to be a technical artist, like you said, right? I can go rectangle. I can drag and drop the rectangle onto the screen, and I can resize it. This is all online. And what you can do here is you can draw out different elements. So if I was going to draw this one, another rectangle, I want to draw another rectangle. So maybe this is my platform. So here's a platform as an example. This is something you can do. And then maybe what you want to do is you want to talk about a player. So you want to maybe draw a couple of more rectangles if you want to really be ugly for the player. So here we go. Here's my player. I'll make a head, right? And then I can add another rectangle.
And this is why we have tablets.
That's right, because if you have tablets, you can actually draw this out. So let's make a smaller, kind of a bigger body. So there's my guy, and this is my dude. And then maybe I want to draw some lines. Guys, this is very bad, right? But the idea is, if you really want to, you can use this tool online, and you can draw the player out on the platform. And you can also indicate that he's jumping or whatever. So you can do this. And this is mockups. So I talked about mockups as a tool. It's really great for designing websites as well as mobile applications, but not so good for game. So I'll leave. But if you want to, you can use this thing. And I'll go into Slack for this one.
Well, this is just a graphic program, right? Like a Prefabs or something.
Yep, I'm going to go there next.
Oh.
Right, so I'm going to go to, these are all these guys. Dan, they got these different things. Here's my COMP253. Notice I've changed what your Slack looks like on COMP253 with a little bit of an icon. Yay. And if you go here to general, if I press B, here's mockups. So this is something you can try out, mockups. And no, I don't want the integration. No thanks. And no, I don't want you to remind me. Delete message. Yay. All right, so there's my mockups. If you want to go there, you can use that. The other one you can use is Krita or any of the other ones. The one John mentioned earlier, which is also a good way of doing things, is if you go to Autodesk, right? And you can, if you go to Autodesk Education, right? You can download a bunch of free software for students.
You have to sign up and use your you need your student number and stuff. But yeah, you can get almost everything.
And if you look at free software, right, you can see that these are some basic free software programs. If I look at See All Products, you can see that there is other things, like, for example, down in here, there's Sketchbook for Students, right? And that's what you want to use, right? So Sketchbook for Students. Sketchbook is honestly an awesome app. It's truly an awesome application, right? So if I sign in, I'd have to sign in. And let me just do that. I believe it's under here. So as a student or a professor, i.centennialcollege.ca. Think so? Yes. And I don't know what my password is. Maybe I do know what my password is. Okay. And then if you notice it's a Sketchbook for Students, I can get access, right? Sketchbook for Students. I've obtained access. Continue to Sketchbook Acts. I can download the app. This is how it works. It's a great little app, by the way. Only because John mentioned it, I'm doing it, John, just for you. Right? Otherwise, I wouldn't. Right? It's not a big download. I find that Sketchbook for students is kind of cool because it gives you one day when it starts some really cool tools for sketching. Sure. I will just accept all the defaults, and I'm going to get up my tablet for a second and connect it. Hopefully it'll work. Add a shortcut to the quick launch bar. Sure, what the heck. Let's pollute my desktop even more. And I don't want to make, actually one thing I don't want is I don't want to associate anything in here, not even TIFFs, because I use other files like Krita and other programs. If I associate stuff here, then every time I double click, it'll try and bring up like Sketchbook, and Sketchbook is not where I want to do my stuff, right? So usually none. You can also press this none to make sure and click next, and then click install. Now this installation process shouldn't take long. As it's happening, I'll pull up my tablet. Hopefully.
Well, some of us just can't afford it. Honestly, I don't get why it's still like $25 a month for students.
I know.
Outrageous. $100 for a year.
Hey, I like Adobe products. They're awesome products, but I don't care about this. And we'll just connect my tablet. So again, I showed you guys my tablet last time. It's a Wacom tablet, which is kind of a little bit older. Hopefully I have all the components. Not this one. Because if you forget one of the things with the tablet is if you forget your connectors, then you can't use it, right? There's also a wireless dongle that you get with your tablet if you buy it, which is kind of cool, and you can use it wireless. However, I have found I don't like the lag that I get. There's a bit of lag sometimes with your tablet. Let's see if I've got an extra port. Do I? I might have one back here. There we go. And let's just click done. And I'm going to connect my tablet computer. Hopefully this will work. Yay, my tablet computer is connected. I have my pen. And to test that it works, I should be able to control. This is it. I'm using my tablet now for that. And what I want to do is I want to bring up my Autodesk Sketchbook. It should have created a space for me somewhere, but who knows in this expanded view what it's done to me, right? So let's just search for it. So I'll say Sketchbook. There it is. All right, cool. Analytics, okay. So Sketchbook, what it does for us is it gives us a panel. And immediately what I can do is in my tablet, it gives me some natural drawing capability, so I can do whatever I want here. And again, I'm using my tablet to do this stuff. You notice on the top left, there is the undo keys. One of the things I like to put up here as well is layers. And you can actually look at the layer editor, which I like to put up. I like to have this on. So I would recommend keeping the layer editor on for your sketchbook, okay? Why? Because I can add layers when I'm drawing. So the layer editor you can find by going Window and going to Layer Editor, all right? You can also look at your brush library. So if I click on the brush library on, I can also see a bunch of different kinds of brushes you can use. So for the artists in the room, you can actually change the type of brushes, the size of the brushes, and all that kind of stuff. However, if all you care about, I'm just going to push this aside for a second, the color of the brush is this one, and this typically is the size of the brush. So if you want to change the size of your brush or the opacity, in this particular case, we'll make it 100%. If I want to change the color of my brush to something like blue, I can do that. So here's my blue brush. And then again, I can, the great thing about this thing is the harder I press, I'll get different levels of sensitivity. So it responds to my tablet, right? The other thing I can do is if I want to use standard shapes, I can do that too. So I can kind of use a kind of some kind of square. So if I want to just kind of describe an object, I can kind of make some kind of bounding box. And let's say, for example, if I want to draw some, which is really quite easy, some kind of platformer elements, I can do that. If I don't want to use anymore, I can go back I can uncheck this, and I can go back to different kinds of drawing. So if I go here, actually it adds in lines. So you can do lines. This one adds in circles, right? And let me just undo those changes. This is a really great thing about it. And again, I can uncheck this whole thing to kind of take that off. And then I can, if I want to, I can start drawing my character. So I want to draw a character. And again, what you want to do, even if it's a stick figure, as an example, or some kind of character with a body, right? So I want to say, well, my character kind of has a body. You know, he's going to have his leg. It's kind of hard to draw on this one, but you know, he has some kind of arm, and it's very basic. He's got a big head. Maybe I want to make my character really, really big, a big head. And if I want to erase anything, let's say if I don't like what I just did, because I really don't, I can go back to my eraser. Or if you have the Wacom tablet, I believe it'll accept the reverse of my pen is the eraser. So I can go through here and actually erase, just like I normally would, parts of the drawing. I can also zoom in and out. So I can take my magnifying glass and I can zoom in as if I'm using the paper. Okay, there it goes. And if I want to, I can also do things like rotate the paper, so I can draw at different angles, which is really kind of cool. So really kind of cool effects, right? Again, I can also move the paper up and down by using the magnifying glass, so I can really get in there, and I can zoom in. So if I want to draw a really much nicer head, a lot of times what I want to do, I want to get like closer in there to give me more control, right? So again, I can do this. And then what I can do is if I want to draw something like, you know, I want to make this guy, you know, he's going to have some kind of hat. So let's give him a kind of a baseball cap, you know, kind of thing. And he's going to have some kind of hair. So I'm going to draw the hair here. It's going to be like a hippie kind of guy with some hair. And then maybe some kind of chin with maybe some kind of nose here. There we go. And you know what? Maybe some kind of sideburns with a really weird ear. You can go as detailed as you want here. Here's his mouth. Right, and let's give him a bit of more of a chin here like this, and with his eye. So here it is. And again, I'm really kind of zoomed in there, so you know, details are very bad. But again, it's not good enough until it is what they say. So again, I can go back in there and kind of talk about my guy. I can erase parts of him, but not the whole scene, which is kind of cool. That's why the you know, the tablet is a really great thing, right? And go back in there and also change some things in his arm. If I don't like the size of the element, all right. Again, the brush that I'm using, if I bring up the brush tab, the brush itself, I can go to this little control right here, and notice that my size is the hardness that I want to. I can kind of bring that a little bit down to the hardness, and the same thing goes with the opposite. I can change the size of my brush typically. I think the size is something else. Let's see how it goes. I'll bring up this thing here. Oh, there's also a really cool, if you press the actual button on your, I know we're running a little late. If you press the button on your pen, right, then you can see that I have access to layers, my ellipse rule, a measuring rule, some kind of fit to view, my zoom. I can also do this actual size. I can do symmetry. I can do symmetry in different directions. I can do a lot of different things. But what I want to do is I want to just change the hardness of my pen a little bit, just down a little bit, my pencil. And then click this away. And what I want to do is I want to kind of maybe erase some of that and put it back. So I want to kind of make the arm. So his arm really should start here. Maybe he's wearing some kind of vest. Here he is. He's wearing a vest. And his arm will start here. And let's say he's got his arm that's here. And we'll put an elbow in there. And then he's got his hand, right, or whatever, holding something. And you know what? He's going to be, let's say he's going to be on the, he's going to be running. So again, this is kind of really weird, but let's say he's going to be doing one of these, his knees here. And we'll make it, he has a big kind of shoe. And as you can see, it's kind of not the best drawing, but again, it's kind of a rush. And we'll put his shoe right there. He's kind of, hey man, what's going on? Let's give him a big thumb up. He's got a big thumb. right? And you can kind of do whatever you want here. It doesn't look that bad. Okay, and maybe give him a bit of a belt. You make him as high fidelity as you want. Okay, if I don't like this guy, I can always erase him, but he's a kind of a weird looking character now, and I can kind of zoom back out. So you can see I've got a little man there, and I can show other things. I can rotate this back to the way it was, so kind of it snaps to view, and I can also make this a little bigger. I can also move it around, so I can say, let's move this thing over here. So I want to talk about how this works, and then I can draw whatever arrows I need, and I can use different pens for this as well. Like, for example, I want to use a pen, and I'm going to show that he's going to kind of move. He's going to jump. May I do that change? That's a bad arrow. So I want to kind of make it so that it jumps. You can also use the built-in tools for this, but think about this. I'm just sketching the arrow, and if I want to use some text, I can do that too. I can put text like jump, right, and press OK. What I can do is when I have this open, only when I have this open, I can move around this thing. I can modify it. I can move it. So I can put this jump. I can change the size of it. So sometimes what I do want to do is I want to make this smaller or bigger, right? And let's move it around again. So jump, and we'll move it around this way. So he's going to jump that way. And you want to describe your interface as much as possible. You can put other elements here. So this is an example of how you can start sketching your stuff out. The really cool thing about Sketchbook is you can enable different layers. The text is on a different layer than the other stuff, the other elements. So here you notice I have this whole element here. I can use enable and disable these elements. I can also create new layers, which I recommend. And in layer 3, I can also lock these layers down. So I can kind of go, hey, this layer here, I want it to be locked. So I don't want to modify my diagram, and I can add layers on top. So I have my basic diagram now, and anything I add in there, I can sketch in. So again, if I wanted to zoom in here, bear with me with the time. I know we're running way over time, but let me just get in there. And let's say if I want to color this guy in, I can use a different brush for that. So let's say I want to use this brush, or let's just bring up the brushes. So I want to bring up maybe some kind of airbrush. Here it is. And you can see the soft point that I'm going to use. That's really cool. And so here's the airbrush, but again, it's really massive. Notice on here as well, I have different palettes for the colors. I can use different colors here built in, right? This is the color palette that I can use. This is the this palette here, right? This gives me my layers, right? I can hide and show some of these basic things to give myself more real estate, okay? So that's one of the tools I have. I have some other tools down here where I have some, I can bring up the tool menu like I had before, different brushes down here, colors, as well as I can crop, I can move or rotate or rectangle. I can do a bunch of these things here. These are all built in as controls. So this is the kind of the color wheel. I can also make different kinds of, I can turn different parts of the display on or off, which is kind of cool. Questions around this stuff? This is kind of like, you know, kind of things I want to show you to make this size. The size has to be way smaller than this, maybe like 8.2. And let's just get rid of this. And now that I've got an airbrush, let's change the color. Let's make the color something else. And you can airbrush different pieces. Like I want to airbrush the, that's too small. Let's go back to this. Airbrush, maybe a size bigger. And we'll go to here. So, you know, you want to kind of make it so that you can add some colors to the platforms, right? Again, to add some kind of extra fidelity, if you will. So again, I want to kind of make this platform a little darker. So give it some space. And then maybe some color to a shirt. So I want to change the color maybe to, like, he's got a green shirt. So kind of, you know, color that shirt in a little bit. Right? And maybe give him some blue pants, but maybe a lighter blue. So kind of make his pants blue. And you can use the airbrush, is kind of cool because it doesn't add too much color in there. Maybe his hat will be red. So, you know, maybe choose a red color. And this is a kind of cool app to kind of, you know, give it some life, right? That's what I'm doing here. But you can do a lot of different things with this tool, and it takes a lot of practice. One thing that I always find is difficult is I got my tablet here, and I'm looking there. Remember I talked about that is not a great workflow for non-artists. You know, like if you're not used to using your tablet this way, it's a thing. It's a learning experience, right? You may not be able to get something that even looks like as bad as this, okay? Whereas on the iPad, notice what you were doing last time. You can see what you're doing, and it's a lot more smoother and everything. The problem is interfacing with the iPad on the PC, I found over last week was a lot of trouble.
What about with a Mac?
Mac's no problem.
What's the software again?
This software?
No, not this one. The one for the iMac and the iPad one.
This is Sketchbook Pro, or Sketchbook, actually, is what it's called.
Like you're talking about the software you're using to connect them.
Oh, it's called AstroPad. AstroPad is the best way. If you actually try AstroPad, it works great. Doesn't disable Blender. It works fantastic.
That's the thing. It's like I have. Oh, I didn't bring it with me, but I have.
So I can undo this one, and what I can do is I can enable the locks on different layers, AstroPad, and then I can go in here and I can continue to you know, erase or modify. You know, again, like we talked about before, it's not good enough until it is, right? And I can make this diagram as high fidelity or low fidelity as I like in order for me to hand it in. Remember, what I want for this one is put in your diegetic, or no, sorry, non-diegetic elements. You're making a platform. You're talking about the level. What does this platformer do? Where's his enemies? I don't have that there yet. What's his enemy look like? Give an example of some of the enemies. And you may want to do more than one diagram. So talk about the platform. What does this platform, his platforms look like? Right now they're blocks. Maybe you want to add some life to the platform. Like, for example, maybe what you want to do is draw some other elements. Like, you know, the platform isn't just like this. Let's add some, maybe the platform has some area on the bottom where it kind of looks more like a platform, right? I'll make some random things here. So I'm just going to outline it here. Sorry?
This is called a concept, right?
Yeah, that's all I'm doing. All I'm doing is,
you don't want the actual assets.
nope, I just literally want you to draw with your hand, right, your stuff. And then what you can do is, again, you can use some basic stuff like an airbrush, and let's add some stuff with the airbrush.
Would you have to use the tablet and like on the computer, or?
I recommend it. You don't have to. You can do it. You can do it with a mouse.
No, I mean
Yeah.
like a pen. Can I do a pen and paper?
You can do a pen and paper and take a picture of it and load it up, scan it in. You can do whatever you want, right? So this kind of stuff. But the idea is that you're talking about some kind of platformer, and maybe you want to draw it out as best you can. So try and give yourself your platformer a little bit of life. Guys, we're running over time. I really got to stop now. But just a review of what we did this week. We talked about a little bit of UI UX and some bad elements of user experience. We're going to talk more about it as we make more stuff and where the button should be placed. Like right now, I put the button in the middle of the screen. But what about if you want to make an accept button or an OK button? How does that work out? How to draw better things. By the way, if you don't have a tablet, the mouse still works okay. You know, it's not so bad. I'm just going to use my mouse here. I'm not using my mouse here. The precision of the tablet is way better. I mean, there's no way I could have drawn something like even half as good as or half as bad as this, right? If I didn't have this. Also, notice that I can take up more space, and I can save this image. So if I say File, Save As, you can save this image in different formats, which is really cool, a PNG image or whatever. So at the end of today, what I'm going to do is I'm going to put up a little lab. It's going to say Lab 1 UI sketch for platformer, and you're going to upload your little sketch that you're going to make, however you make it, whether you do it on a paper, do it on a whiteboard, take a picture of it somewhere, but I want you to label everything. So one thing I haven't had a chance to do here in my sketch is I want to label this guy. He's my player. So maybe what I want to do here is add a label that says player, right? Here's my player. I can also change the size of my text and all that kind of stuff. And again, I can use my stuff, let's just layer it here and move it down here. So this is my player. And maybe I wanted to use some lead lines or whatever. So I want to use my line tool. So again, this tool is really great because even for non-artists, what it does is, let's just go to which layer is not locked. Maybe this layer. And just, you can draw lines, undo. I meant to do lines, right? So here's my player, and he's going to jump. And you can start defining your screen slowly on what your platformer is going to look like. And if it looks as bad as mine, it's okay, right? because again, you don't have to be an artist. All I want to do is get me to understand what your platform is going to look like,
As descriptive as
right?
possible.
As descriptive as possible. Maybe instead of jump, you use a grappling hook. So show the grappling hook. Show that that's what you use to move from one platform to the other. Again, I don't expect you to make a real platformer. I'm just imagining a game. Imagine your own platformer and draw it yourself. Please don't use any assets from anybody else. Don't use Mario. Don't use other platforms. You can use references. You can look at actual platforms you've seen in other games to give you some inspiration, no problem, and other characters in the game, right? But what I'd like you to do is try and do as much of it on your own as you can, okay? And that's going to be due next week. All right, so let me just kill this one. Okay, any questions around the stuff we did today? So again, I'm going to put that lab up at the end of the class, and it'll be due next week. It'll be worth a small percentage of your final grade, probably something like 2%, right? Every week, I'm going to give you some exercise at the end, okay, that I want you to practice or do something, right? And then by the next week, we'll have a chance to review it and make it better, all right? So do your best to try and do this exercise. It's good practice for you. You can use any program you want. You don't have to use Sketchbook. You can use Krita. You can try and use Krita. You can try and use Photoshop, Illustrator, Paint, the wall, a napkin, whatever you want to make this thing go, okay? Guys, thank you so much, and we'll do more. I'll see you next week.